to start then. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the second webinar organized by the Energy Pathfinder project, specifically by the communications partner NC Insulation. Our speaker today will be Bardur. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name very well, Bardur. But Bardur is an architect working in the Faroe Islands for Landsverk, the Heritage Trust of the Faroes. He studied architecture at the Danish Academy of Fine Arts, also studied urban planning, and he specialized in historic buildings, the maintenance and retrofit of public buildings, and in particular vicarages that are quite common in Faroes as historic buildings that were used for religious purposes historically. He's now working for Landsverk, the land trust, and is responsible for the retrofit of a number of vicarages, having recently completed or nearly completed one, which is the theme of this webinar. The Energy Pathfinder project is a European partnership project funded under the Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic program, including 6 partners from 5 different Northern Periphery regions, being Ireland, Scotland, Faroes, Finland, and Sweden. All of these partners are developing demonstrator projects of historic buildings in their own region, and we hope to be able to highlight them, the improvements and the proposals for them through different webinars as we go along. To introduce the project, I'd like to show you a short video prepared by NC Insulation, which explains the project basically. Thank you for your presentation, Jose. As you said, my name is Bardur. I'm from Faroe Islands. I'm an architect. Work at Landsverk, which is the Office of Public Works, actually, in the Faroe Islands. This picture is not from the location, but it's a typical winter morning when it's good weather in the Faroe Islands. It was on another project I was working on. See if I can get it moving. Yes, like this. Yeah, the title, Approach to Sustainability, a Retrofitting of Historical Vicarage of Viðareiði. Vicarages in the Faroe Islands. Landsverk is actually helping the diocesan authorities with maintenance of the vicarages, together with the Ministry of Culture, who is the people who are caretakers of the diocesan authorities. And Landsverk, with the Office Public of Works, is helping all the ministries in all kind of public work, and also the diocesan authorities, the owners. The church used to be a Danish jurisdiction, but in 2007 it became a Faroese jurisdiction. At that time, the vicarages were in a very, very bad shape. There had been more or less no maintenance for tens of years, decades. So they were in a very bad shape, and it was very difficult for our bishop to accept to go on with these buildings, because, as he said, bad buildings make unhappy priests, which makes unhappy church members. So he contacted the Ministry of Culture, which contacted Landsverk, and since then we have had a collaboration, if you can call it like that. And Landsverk works with public buildings and infrastructure. All buildings, all roads, all airports, helipads, tunnels, and ferry harbors. So it's a pretty large organization. Sorry, I go back. There. As you can see, the red dots show the vicarages in the Faroe Islands, which are spread all over from north to south. We have 20 vicarages, and the one in the Viðareiði is the one at the top, the red dot. And the capital city where I live and where my office is here where you see the 4 dots. That's Tórshavn, the capital city. It's around 1.5 hour drive from Tórshavn to Viðareiði, which pretty much shows the size of the islands, with 52,000 inhabitants. We have categorized them in 3 different types. The classical vicarages, the old farmhouses from the time when the priest got his income from a farm. So if he became a vicar of the Faroe Islands, of a special place, he had a farm, which was more or less the best you can have in the old Faroese society. So there are pretty old vicarages like this from 1789, and this in Kvívík, which was restored a couple of years ago, and the Viðareiði in the middle, and at the southern islands in Iron, and the last one just when the First World War started, Sandoy. And then there was another type built after that time, after 15 around, which are vicarages made just as residential houses and office for the vicar. We have a number of them. The last one built in 1996, so that's around 24 years ago, and we are planning on building another one in the southern islands right now, actually, was supposed to be a meeting in the Southern Island this day, but I couldn't join and another guy couldn't join, so we are not going to have that meeting yet. But that means we are going to have one new vicarage. And then there's the third type, which is just a common house bought and converted to a vicarage. The last one was bought 3 or 4 years ago in the down right corner in Hoivik. So that's why we have 20 houses now, in different shapes, of course. In December in 2008, there was made a report on every building, which showed what shape they were in, and it showed that they were in a very bad shape. There were plans how a maintenance plan for them. Actually, we haven't followed them thoroughly because we have actually done more than was suggested at that time. But it showed some very significant things about the shape of the buildings, which we had to take care of one by one. Ónagerði is we had already started on when I joined this Northern Periphery and Arctic program, and that gave me a very good opportunity to rethink this place, because Viðareiði is a historical place. It was some kind the capital of the Northern Islands for several hundred years ago. It's a very small place with 350 people living there in the Northern Island, with a very beautiful views. And as you can see on this photo, with very rough weather from time to time, because it's in the far north and it's the Atlantic Ocean. The western winds go right into it. So it has been there for around 500 years. Not this particular buildings, but we can see the remains of other buildings, other vicarages under it, and you can read in the history books about it. It's placed near the church. You see in the down left corner. The church is at the sea, and right behind it is the green roof is the vicarage. It's a very beautiful area, but of course gives some challenges when we're talking about what we can do around this place. It has great significance for the locals, of course, but also for all the Northern Islands, and also for people actually in Tórshavn or the Southern Islands, because everyone knows this place somehow, even though it takes around 7 tunnels from Tórshavn to reach it by car. We had a lot of discussions on what can we do. It was fully heated by oil, by fuel, heavy fuel. But they had tried to, as you saw at the previous pictures, they were trying with air-to-air heat pumps to just that was only to get it a little more green, as they called it. But we were discussing solar panels, but it's not obvious to put solar panels on the roof. It's a very beautiful turf roof. Windmill in the area would probably destroy more than it gives. But then there was a discussion about a watermill, because 100 years ago there was actually a watermill down here, and we could in the future have a watermill providing electricity to this place. Air-to-air heat pump we have tried, and then there's geothermal heat pump, which can be pipes in the ground, or it can be drilled into the basalt. This is what it looked like when it was built in 1854. A house, a farmhouse, with yarns and cow houses and food stores and meat rooms. And here you can see the windmill, the water mill, sorry. And up at the upper right corner, you can see how a drawing from that time looked like. That was it. You make how you want the rooms to be, and then build. And what happened in the Faroe Islands was very beautiful, actually. There is a tradition made over centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years, how to build buildings. You don't draw it, you just build it, and tradition says you only say how big the rooms should be or how tall the walls have to be, then you build it. This is a typical house from the 1860s to 1915, around the Faroe Islands, with a stone foundation to like level the house so the water doesn't come in. In the basement you can have a cow to heat the house, and then you have a timber house on the top, which is actually prefabricated in another building during the winter. Everything is prefabricated. Then a team comes to the place and build the building in very fast. So it's a very genius way of building. And this is the way the vicarage is built. When we came to the site, we could see that narrow entrance, the very narrow entrance to the attic. And we knew that the former vicars had more or less had this hatch locked because it was too cold in the attic. The heat pump was rusted, even though it was only 4 years old. But, if you remember the previous picture of the windy place, it's fully understandable that it was very rusty. So that's not a way to continue with the air-to-air, and air is not a comfort way of heating a house. So we had to think in another way. The floors were in a very bad quality, layers of floors during many years, many decades. Kitchen was from around 68, we believe, and the paint was some plastic which had actually destroyed the very, very beautiful handcraft which this building is made out of. And the cow house right here was actually in perfect shape, just like when it was built 170 years ago. But the laundry part was very, very, very cold. The toilets were smelly, and no discussion of we had to do something about that as well. So we had to go through the entire building, probably at the inside at least. This is upper left corner is where the vicar was sleeping. It was not a very cozy room with bad floors and low between floor and ceiling. The windows in the roof were helpful, of course, to get light in, but they have one bad thing, that we have these earwigs. They are very famous earwigs in the Viðareiði area because there are lots of them. And they experienced that if they had this window closed for a week because of winter time, and they opened it, it wasn't 1 or 2 earwigs, it could be 100 earwigs falling on the floor. And we had to rethink the way of getting light into, and it was very narrow rooms, and no one really wanted to stay as part of it. So we made a plan. We more or less, like retrofitting says, more or less went back to some situation which the building had been in, removed some of the walls, and the kitchen we tried to make more modern, made it a little bigger, removed some of the smaller rooms. took some of the smaller rooms around here into the kitchen, and the bathroom we made a little bigger and moved one wall to where it should be and another wall as well. This is actually the old toilet. It was a very modern house in 1854 with 3 holes in the ground here. 3 people at the same time would be at the toilet. That's very fancy, but we don't retrofit everything. We don't do that. It's actually the vicar's office. The attic was originally only having this room. The rest was just for storage, and then a small room at this end of the building. This was just some drawings how the building would look like when we after the restoration. This is how we wanted the upper level to look like. The walls, which have been here, the ceiling here, and the roof windows we removed and built new walls further in 750 centimeters like that, and built up dormers, I think they're called, which are almost like small horizontal, the vertical windows. And this is a typical Faroese construction with around 6 inches of earth in the roof, and there is rock wool on the inside. Sometimes if we like to see the original construction of the roof, we put the insulation on the outside. But it's not necessary to have very much insulation, so we only have around 3 inches, because the turf roof is also helping on that part. To end the discussion on how to heat it, we choose to have a hole in the ground, 240 meters. They actually wanted to have it 280, but the ground got too hard. So they stopped at 240, which was actually a very good hole, because it was filled with water with a temperature of around 8 degrees. So they were happy, the guys who were making the heating system. And we connected it to a water-to-water system, which could give us the possibility of heating the floors, because the heat is not as high as it is in an oil heated system. So that's why then we need to have very, very big radiators, and we didn't want that. And actually, electricity didn't come to Viðareiði until 1956. So we thought removing the radiators would bring the building back to before 1956, which we thought was a good idea. So the entire floor is heating the building on the ground level, and in the attic there are a few radiators, but the heat is moving in the house. We could not have radiators at the upper level, because it would ruin the ceilings, the ground level. We had to do some studies on how the underground is behaving, because we knew there are caves in these areas. These yellow lines show caves or cracks in the ground, and if we enter 50 meters down and into a cave, it will not be a very useful hole. This red dot shows where we made the drill. And this is installation of the heating system. As you can see up here, we put aluminium and tubes, and they have to go through the construction, of course. It's not a very cozy room, and this is under construction, so it looks actually like a mess, but now it looks actually okay. This is a place where originally they had a cow or two to heat the floors, but now we have modern system to heat the floors. It was pretty much the same. You can make as many plans as you like, but it's not until you open the building that you can see what is going on. But one of the first things we found was the original insulation we could see it was from 1942 because the magazines in the wall were from 1942. Since the vicar's wife is an archaeologist, she took care of all the magazines. And you can see that very beautiful door. It's made vicar's wife, Laura Heilman, who lived here some years, 9 years. She was a great inspiration to a lot of people in the Faroe Islands, and a lot of artists started because of her and her friends who were painting. They said that these paintings are Danish apple trees blossoming in the spring, which she missed very much during the hard winter times in Viðareiði. I can understand her, absolutely. So we are of course preserving them. The attic we just had to remove everything, because it was in such a bad shape, and the floors mostly were in adequate shapes, but some places you could see right out, which made the wind, of course, get in. We found some interesting windows in the top, and two of them, a formal room maybe for a working man at the farm, living up there in a small room. We wanted to preserve that as well. We like to try to always in discussion with the people who are living there and of the diocesan authorities, the owners of the building, on how to do. We try to tell a story. Don't make it into a museum. It should be a modern dwelling for a modern vicar with his family. When we came to at this point, I could see that the building was in a very, very good shape. The bishop didn't understand what I meant because he thought this looks like, I don't know, it didn't look good, but I could see the materials were very good. The original floors from 1854 were in a good shape, the walls were in a good shape, everything that wasn't put there later was in very good shape. So that was very lucky, because you never know what happens. Now we could make the real plan to do with the building. And this, in the upper level corner, is where the toilets originally were. And you can see the floors. They're built more or less directly on the soil, which is not good. We had to do some digging, and we found some windows in the smoke room, which we didn't know had been there. And we saw some paintings which showed the same, actually. And the kitchen floors were in a bad shape. All the other floors were in a good shape. We were very lucky, except from the attic where the bathroom had been. That floor was destroyed. We found some funny things. This small oven from the small room in the attic. See, all the original door handles were in a good shape, and you see a lot of traces of how the building has been used for 170 years, which we of course have registered. And a lot of different materials, a lot of wallpapers, colors, ladder up to the attic room, which we also registered. And here's how it looks when we put the dormers on it. I was pretty nervous of doing that, because it is what we can call a long house, and when you do all of a sudden the vertical building materials in it, will it destroy it? but we believe not, because we do not do anything to the construction. It is between the construction. If someone in the future wants to get rid of it or has another better idea, they can do so. But since the entire floor was gone, we had no problems of doing the entrance more lighter. Made a new stair made by a local carpenter and opened up the entire roof and added some colors, which were, of course, in discussion with the vicar and his wife, of course. We gave them a new kitchen, which is, you see the table also has a history. It's made out of the local stone. When we get heat from the local stone, we also can get the kitchen table from the local stone, and the local carpenter also made this maple timber kitchen. And here we had to add new floors, which that was okay. These also are the original floors. We had a lot of discussion on the walls. Should they have colors or should they not have colors? Because my wife wanted some wallpapers. We found some old wallpapers from Sweden, which we added to the building. Originally, the building was insulated by wallpaper. You had to put wallpaper on the walls, and then the wind couldn't as easy go into the building. Heavy curtains and wallpaper was what we protected. We don't need that now. Some of the walls were so beautiful, we just had to just leave them there. Very beautiful timber constructions, warm and goes well to the floors as well. This is the old place where the old vicars probably were drinking whiskey and smoking cigar and reading the Bible. Probably. Finest room, so the paintings from Flora Heilmann. They haven't been furnitured really yet. They have moved in. And some different colors as well. This is also under construction when the picture was taken, but it has been finished now. The new bathroom, where you see parts of the construction behind. This is the shower behind this timber. And this is the smoke room. The smoke room in the Faroe Islands was the room where the people working on the farm, not the vicar and his wife, but people work on the farm, they could live here, they could work here, they could eat here. Their daily life was in this room. So this was an important room for them. They were not supposed to be in the vicar's living room, only for service. And they had some alcoves where they could sleep. The floor is not originally from the 1854, it's from the 90s around. They had made a lot of changes in this room during many years, which we took it all away from the walls. Some modern things are good and some modern things are not good. So we're just trying to the attic, we made a more lighter room now. Bedrooms over there and a new toilet in there. These warmers give a very beautiful light. Now it's almost like a cathedral, small cathedral. the rooms. And here you can see the roof window from which we found, which is very beautiful as well. This will be the vicar's sleeping room. These floors are, we just cleaned them up. We didn't do more than that. It is not, they are not meant to be as fine as the floors below, because these are only for storage originally, so we keep it in the original way. And we added the rooms, not, we didn't want to get the walls all the way up, so we actually made a roof on each room that have the view through the entire building. Next picture. This is the original bedroom, which was probably for the vicar's right hand or something like that, because it was bigger than the other. He must have been something, the people who, the man who lived up in this room, which we restored in this is a typical way of building door handles and things like that in the Faroe Islands at that time. And we made a small alcove in here as well. So this is the last slide. Now, what we're going to do now, the vicar and his wife moved into the building in the mid of December, and that's a very good time to move. So that's the worst time when it's to the weather. The wind is hard, can be pretty cold. It's not as cold in the Faroe Islands as it is in the mainland Europe or northern Sweden. It's around 0 degrees. Maybe sometimes it goes below, as you can see in the upper picture. We had not a lot of snow. We have never massive cold days, but we have a lot of wind and we have a lot of rain. So it's important that the building can be like, it doesn't need to have a lot of insulation. The wind must not come into the building. And already the first days in January, we could see that the west end, which is against the sea here, was colder than we wanted. We couldn't get it warmer than 18 degrees. So we have to do something about that when the weather changes, and we'll have to do it from the outside. And the smoke room came down to 14 degrees. And that's much too low. So we'll also have to look at those walls. Otherwise, we are working on a system how to monitor the building over the next years. And but the bishop's office, the season authorities, wants us to monitor all of the 20 vicarages in the future, so we can see everything we add or if it has an effect. And maybe they are going to do the same with the churches. There are 62 churches in the Faroe Islands. So I think that is around it.
Thank you very much, Bartol. That's extremely interesting. There's a lot of information there.
Yeah.
We'd like to open the webinar up for questions now. What I would like you to do is, if you want to ask a question, please state your name, your organization. Now, there's no mechanism for giving you the microphone. You'll just, once you speak, you should be able to just continue speaking. If you want to be seen, you have a video, a button at the top of your screen, and you can press that, and we will see your picture, your camera as well. Please don't switch all your cameras on, because that might interfere with the reception. But if you do want to speak, you're welcome to use your camera through the video facility. So, as I say, if you want to ask a question, just state your name and go ahead with it. Would anybody like to start?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, Kevin McCartney here from Cork. The most surprising, thank you, Barder. Thank you very much for this presentation. The most surprising detail for me was the thinness of your insulation. You showed us a drawing with 3 inches of insulation plus turf.
Yeah.
And that's my big surprise, that there is not more insulation. I do not think the turf adds a great deal to the insulation because it will normally be wet. And do you have an idea of what the overall U value was of the insulation plus turf?
I don't have it, no.
Okay.
And we have, just the thing you say, we have had that discussion many times in the Faroe Islands. What happens when it's wet, and what happens when the water steams out of the window? So we'll just have to find out with the monitoring.
Yeah.
And one more thing, as I think I mentioned that we sometimes put the isolation on the top of the roof, but we didn't want to do that. We could add with the more insulation on the top of the roof, just under the turf, but then we have to take the turf off. And we did not want to do that in this, because the money was, of course, limited. We
Okay.
will not take the turf off as long as it's in a good shape.
Right.
We'll wait. But if it's necessary and it shows that it's getting colder or it uses more energy than we want it to do, then we necessarily will have to do that. But that's also
Good.
it's important that we don't thicken the turf too much. Then it doesn't look original.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's a very important consideration for the historic building. So, thank you for your answer.
Come.
Would anybody else like to ask a question?
Hi, this is Karina here in NC. I'm here with a group of participants and just wondering about the geothermal heat pump, how much heat you actually get from using that system, and because you were saying there you'd like to raise temperatures, is it a very effective system or?
It is a very effective system. It is actually only a heat pump, more or less. Sometimes they put the pipes into the sea, or dig it into the ground around 2 meters. It's actually the length of the tubes that decides what it is. It's no problem to get used water out of it at all. Oh yeah, we decided in the beginning to have the floor heating at 40 degrees because of the floors are around 40 millimeters thick. So that should generate something like 30 degrees at for the floors. But then it goes to another system which is for the showers and for the used water in the kitchen and so on. That has a higher level. But already in the beginning, in December, we had to raise the level of the floor heating. And the floor heating actually heats both floors because the floors at the upper level is so thin. But still they have radiators, and that plays.
That's great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? There's one question that I'd like to make, Bardo. Your turf roofs, they're very attractive, very ecological. Have you had a lot of problems with them? The reason I ask this is because I worked in a project in England that used turf roofs about 15 years ago, and now they say they have to change all the roofs So they appear to have lasted only 15 years. Now, I don't know if it's the way that they constructed them. So my question is, do you have problems with your turf roofs? Do you have a particular method for building them that makes them last longer? What's the secret of your turf roofs?
The secret is probably the rain. It rains a lot here, and we get problems with the turf roofs if you have a very dry summer. A dry summer can appear with around 3 months without rain. Then they dry up, and then the roof dies and falls off. Or the wind comes, if on a dry roof, it flies off. So what we do on modern houses is that we build a water system on the top of the roof, so you can turn it on if it gets too dry. So, but this is a method we have used for hundreds of years, since like forever, 1,000 years, like or more than since they started building houses in the Faroe Islands. They have used turf roofs.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Because we are in lack of local materials, we have rock and we have grass. The wood we have to import. Normally, when people built houses in the Faroe Islands many years ago, they made them out of stone and what you call it, so drift wood. So what they could find at the beach.
Yeah, driftwood.
Yeah. But this is a house which the authorities have built. That's why it has luxury of so much timber from that time.
I see. Yeah, so all the wood is imported, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
But the details that you mentioned about the building of turf roofs are very interesting, and to my knowledge, they're not being applied by other timber frame builders, new timber frame builders in other countries. In England, grass roofs are fairly recent. This project that I'm talking about was built in the 70s. They obviously didn't have the history of using turf roofs that you have, and therefore hadn't really worked out the details that you need. And it wouldn't surprise me if the roofs died with a hot summer and then blew off the next time there was a strong wind because of not being aware of how to keep them alive.
All these centuries of experience, of course, have made them have showed people how to build houses. The roof is exactly 42 degrees, and it has like there's a slope at the bottom, third bottom of the roof, to make sure that it doesn't slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good example of how the technology is developed over hundreds of years in one country can be useful to another country that's applying similar sorts of systems and aren't familiar with them. Does anybody else have any other questions? I was interested also to see how you were altering the interiors of the buildings, and the fact that they're made out of timber panels obviously makes it a lot easier to move walls and so on, which is really a facility that stone and brick buildings don't have to the same extent in other regions like Ireland and Scotland possibly. You seem to be able to alter the layout and the dimensions and the roof sizes, even roof heights. Do you find that planning and building regulations are any sort of an obstacle? For instance, I noticed that your roof heights looked a bit low in some of the attic.
it's not an obstacle because in our regulations there are special regulations for buildings, old buildings, especially if they are of a historical significance. Then you have you just they just agree with it. This is and just do it in the best way we can. But no one wants to destroy the buildings, and no one really wants this to only be a museum. So we cannot use the normal regulation, and it would not be possible to make the walls as thick as the regulations would say to have. If it was a modern house, we would not have. We would not be allowed to build it. Simply.
Yeah.
It would have demanded thicker walls.
Yeah.
And the roof, as Kevin mentioned.
Yes, well, this is one of the things that we find in Ireland, for example. The building regulations of a new building are so stringent that there's certain materials that you can't use, like straw, cob. Just doesn't give you the sort of insulation that's required by the current building regulations. So it's becoming difficult to use certain types of traditional materials because they don't meet the building regulation standards. You mentioned that you were doing monitoring of the vicarages. What are you monitoring? Are you monitoring temperature, moisture, air quality?
Yes, so that's what is planned to do. We haven't put it in work yet. The idea was to monitor each room, temperature of each room, and of course, what is the use of electricity is very important. What does the heat pump use of electricity?
Yeah.
Electricity in Viðareiði is partly of sustainable electricity because it comes from water energy. That's okay, but for us it's also important that we could make it local. That we in time, in some years, not now, would use not solar but light energy panels of some sort. They are experimenting with it in the southern islands. They have made an entire football, what you call it? Yeah, the football plane. They have plastered over with the solar panels. And they expected this winter, and January or in December and January, it proves just enough electricity for one single house. So that's not in India yet. It gets so dark in the Faroe Islands during December and January. So that's not an option yet, but it's important for us to have energy which is sustainable, also for electricity.
May I ask a question again? It's Kevin here.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello. Interestingly, you used the word narrative when you showed a picture of the upstairs rooms, and you were talking about the vicar's wife from 100 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Now, I don't know if you remember, the word narrative harvest was used in the early phase of our application for funding.
Oh yeah.
And we've always had kind of debates about what on earth did this mean, narrative harvest. So I'm just curious if you could tell us any more about what you mean when you talked about the narrative of, I suppose you're talking about the people who lived in the building before.
Yes. It's like maybe a little, when I see a building which has a certain age, it always has possibility of telling a story. It could be good stories, it could be bad stories. But there's always stories. That's interesting. We are trying to be some kind of storytellers. through the building, you can like read the building, what is going on, and it's very bad what you see. We can get rid of it. But if it's good what you see, we can like put it up on another level. That is very important to do. There are lots of stories of this building about, of course, ghosts and dead children and everything, you know, which of course belongs to smoke room stories like that, because there has been a vicarage on this exact site for the last 500 years.
Right. When you use the word smoke room, is it talking about people sitting to smoke tobacco, or is it some other meaning to do with the fire for water?
It's the fire they have in the middle of the floor in the room. There is a fire, and right above that, in the roof, there is a hole for the smoke to get out. But there is no, of course, air conditioning and things like that. So the smoke actually is always in the room. It's really a smoke room.
Right.
People work and they sleep and they eat and they do everything in that room.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that there's a very interesting lesson in what you said, Barbara. For our project, we have a report that we've drafted, the initial draft, which is a description of the 6 demonstrators that we're looking at. And it's supposed to be a narrative harvest, as Kevin has said. What we've given at the moment is a very general description of each building. But what you're saying is there is a story in each building of what went on in the different rooms and how the building was used. And maybe we could consider the partners responsible for each demonstrator writing an additional narrative, the story of how the building was used and things that might have shaped the building through its use. And we could add that onto our current narrative, which is essentially, as I say, just a description of the different demonstrators. That's something that we could continue looking at and possibly add in future.
I think this is very important because we are defining historic value as being greater than just to do with architectural history. And these stories about the people who lived and acted in the buildings is one of the reasons why we sometimes preserve buildings. Social value, and I think these stories that you refer to are certainly worth us recording as part of the justification in the selection of the buildings we've used.
Absolutely. Right, I think that unless there's any other questions, that takes us to the end of the webinar that we said would end at 12 o'clock, which is coming up now. As you are probably aware, if you're listening in, this webinar is part of an ongoing project which is looking at different historic buildings. We will be having other webinars. We are not sure when the next one will be. It'll be a month or just over a month from now. Date's still to be fixed, and the theme is still to be fixed, although probably we will be making use of the work that's being done in the project around the different demonstrators as our key theme, really. So please, if you enjoyed this webinar and found it useful, please keep in touch with Corina and NC Installation in order to find out when the next one will be, what the theme will be, and how to register for it. We would also, of course, appreciate any feedback that you want to give us on the webinar, which will help us to maybe address some of the interests that you might have for future webinars, or indeed any questions that you might have specifically about the retrofit that's been described, the vicarages that Bardo is working with, and indeed any other aspects of the Energy Pathfinder project. Just email us at that email address that was shown a few minutes ago, and we will try to address your questions. If there's no other issues, I'd like to close the webinar. Thank you all for attending. Please keep
thank you.
on our website. And thanks particularly to Bardur for his presentation and the effort made in presenting your interesting experiences to us, and to Corina and all of you at NCE for the excellent promotion, advertising and support that you've given to this presentation. Thanks a lot, everybody, and see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Cheers.